discarded in a ravine for being born incomplete. The newborn's feeble cries echoed through the canyon until they reached the one person who saw her missing arm not as a curse, but as powerful medicine. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Under a winter sky heavy with unshed snow, the anguished cries of childbirth echoed through the thin walls of the Mitchell cabin. In this remote corner of Arizona, where ponderosa pines stood sentinel against the harsh wilderness, Martha Mitchell clutched the rough-hewn bedpost as her body surrendered to the ancient rhythm of bringing life into the world. The midwife's weathered hands worked with practiced efficiency, her lips pressed into a grim line as the baby's first wail pierced the December air. "A girl," the midwife announced, her voice flat as she wrapped the infant in clean linen. Then came the pause, the terrible silence that would forever mark this birth. "But she's missing her left arm, clean below the shoulder." Edgar Mitchell's face hardened like the frozen ground outside their window. His eyes, cold as river stones, refused to meet his wife's pleading gaze. "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away," he muttered, turning to stare into the fireplace where flames devoured pine logs with hungry orange tongues. "Let me hold her," Martha whispered, arms trembling as she reached for her daughter. The tiny face, red and scrunched in confusion at this harsh new world, softened as she cradled the child against her breast. Perfect fingers on one hand stretched toward her mother's face, seeking connection in a room grown suddenly cold with judgment. "It's not right, Martha," Edgar said, his voice carrying the weight of generations of superstition. "A child born like that. It's a sign, a burden we cannot bear." The midwife slipped away, leaving behind instructions for the infant's care that she suspected would never be followed. She crossed herself at the threshold, murmuring a prayer for the innocent soul she was leaving behind. That night, while winter winds howled like wounded animals across the valley, Martha wept silent tears that froze upon her cheeks. Edgar paced before the fire, Bible clutched in white-knuckled hands, reading passages about tribulation and testing. By dawn, his resolve had crystallized into cruel certainty. "The ravine beyond Thompson's Creek," he said, pulling on his coat. "No one goes there in winter. It will be a mercy, Martha. God will understand." "Edgar, please," she begged, clutching the sleeping infant to her chest. "She's our daughter." But in this harsh land, where survival demanded wholeness and strength, Edgar saw only weakness in the child's missing limb. He pried the baby from Martha's arms while she sobbed into her pillow, too weak from childbirth to fight him. "The Lord tests us in ways we cannot understand," he said, wrapping the infant in a thin blanket. "This is his will." Miles away, where the canyon walls rose like cathedral spires toward an indifferent sky, 73-year-old Nietzsche moved with the deliberate grace of one who had survived many winters. His weathered face, lined with the wisdom of decades, turned toward the rising sun as he gathered herbs that stubbornly grew even in winter's grip. The Apache elder's fingers, gnarled as juniper roots, carefully harvested plants that his ancestors had used for healing since time immemorial. The wind shifted, bringing with it a sound so faint he nearly dismissed it as imagination. Nietzsche paused, head tilted. There it came again, a cry, high and desperate, echoing from somewhere below the ridge. Not coyote, not bird, something else. He followed the sound, descending carefully along a path few would notice until he reached a cluster of rocks. There, wedged between stone and earth, lay a bundle that moved with feeble determination. The thin blanket had partly unwrapped, revealing the tiny red face of an infant, no more than hours old, with one perfect arm and one empty sleeve. "Ah," he breathed, kneeling beside the abandoned child. "So this is why the spirits called me here today." Nightshade gently lifted the baby, noting how she had been positioned to slowly freeze or starve, yet somehow protected enough by the rocks to survive the night. He unwrapped his own warm blanket and swaddled her properly against the bitter cold. "The one who left you here did not understand your power, little one," he murmured, tucking her securely against his chest. "A child born this way carries special medicine." The journey back to the settlement was arduous. Nature cradled the infant against his chest, his body bent forward to shield her from the biting wind that swept down from the mountains. The child had fallen silent, conserving what little strength remained in her tiny frame. Only the subtle rise and fall of her chest assured him that life still clung tenaciously to this fragile vessel. "You fight like a warrior already," he whispered, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "The ancestors watch over you today." The settlement appeared on the horizon as the winter sun began its early descent. A collection of dwellings nestled against the protective embrace of towering cliffs. Smoke rose from fire pits in lazy spirals, promising warmth and community. Children's laughter carried across the valley as they chased one another between the homes, their games interrupted at the sight of the returning elder. "Grandfather comes!" a boy shouted, pointing toward Nightsh's approaching figure. Eliza Running Bird was the first adult to reach him. The tribe's medicine woman hurried forward, her keen eyes immediately drawn to the bundle in Nightsh's arms. "What have you brought us, old man?" she asked, peeling back the edge of the blanket. Her sharp intake of breath was followed by a soft exclamation. "A baby? Where did you find a white infant?" Others gathered now, forming a circle around Nightshade. Faces reflected curiosity, concern, and in some, wariness. "She was left to die in the ravine," Nightshade explained, his voice carrying the weight of what he had witnessed. "Abandoned because she comes to this world with one arm instead of two." Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. Some made signs to ward off bad spirits, others moved closer, eyes softening at the sight of the helpless child. "The white people's ways are strange and cruel," said Thomas Swifthorse, one of the tribal elders. His face, weathered by 80 winters, revealed nothing of his thoughts. "Why bring her here? This will only bring trouble from the town." "Would you have me leave her to the coyotes?" Nightshade asked, meeting the elder's gaze without flinching. "The spirits guided me to her. That is answer enough for me." Eliza stepped forward, gently taking the infant from Nightshade's arms. With practiced hands, she examined the child, the stump where her left arm should have been, her eyes, her breathing. "She is strong, despite what they did to her," Eliza announced. "But hungry and cold, she needs milk and warmth immediately." Sarah, too. Rivers pushed through the crowd, a young mother whose own child had been lost to fever just weeks before. Without speaking, she reached for the infant, a determination in her eyes that brooked no argument. "I have milk," she said simply. "I will feed her." Inside Sarah's dwelling, warmed by a crackling fire, the infant suckled hungrily. Life flowed back into her limbs. Color returned to her pale cheeks. The women of the tribe gathered, bringing soft rabbit skins for bedding, tiny garments sewn for children now grown, and wisdom passed through generations. "She needs a name," Eliza said, watching the child with thoughtful eyes. "Something to give her strength for the path ahead." Nightshade, seated by the fire, nodded slowly. "Ayana," he said after a long silence. "Eternal blossom." His gnarled finger gently traced the curve of the baby's cheek. "For she will bloom where others thought she would wither." Outside, the Council of Elders debated long into the night. Some argued for returning the child to the white settlement. Others feared retribution if they kept her. But Nightshade's voice, though quiet, carried the weight of respect earned through decades of wisdom. "The Creator sends children as gifts," he said. "This one was sent twice, first to parents who rejected the gift, then to us. Who are we to question the Creator's wisdom? In the end, they agreed. The child would stay, at least until spring made travel to the orphanage in Phoenix possible. None voiced what many suspected, that by then bonds would form that could not easily be broken. As the first heavy snowflakes of a winter storm began to fall, Ayanna slept peacefully in Sarah's arms, unaware that her abandonment had led her not to death, but to a people who saw her difference not as curse, but potentially as blessing. In the Mitchell cabin, Martha lay awake, tears streaming silently down her face as Edgar slept beside her. Her arms ached with emptiness, her breasts painful with milk her baby would never drink. She stared at the ceiling, whispering apologies to a daughter she believed was already among the angels. Winter melted into spring, and spring blossomed into summer. The journey to the Phoenix orphanage never materialized. Instead, with each passing day, Ayanna's tiny fingers wound themselves more tightly around the hearts of those who cared for her. Sarah Two Rivers became mother in every way that mattered. Her grief for her lost child transformed into fierce protection for this unexpected gift. She carried Ayanna everywhere, strapped to her back in a cradleboard decorated with protective symbols, singing ancient lullabies in a language Ayanna would come to know as her own. "She watches everything," Sarah remarked to Eliza one warm afternoon as they gathered wild onions. "Her eyes miss nothing." Ayanna, now 6 months old, sat propped against a basket, her dark eyes tracking a butterfly with intense concentration. Her right arm reached out, fingers grasping at the air as the insect danced just beyond her reach. "She will need that awareness," Eliza replied, her hands never ceasing their work. "The world is not kind to those who are different." When Ayanna reached her first birthday, marked by the winter solstice, Naiche presented her with a special gift, a small leather pouch embroidered with blue porcupine quills designed to hang at her waist. "For your treasures," he told her. Though she was too young to understand the words, every child needs a place to keep what is precious to them. By 2, Ayanna walked with confident steps, adapting to her balance without the counterweight of a second arm. Where others might have seen limitation, she found adaptation. She learned to steady a bowl with her knees while eating, to climb by, gripping with her right arm and finding footholds where others used strength alone. The children of the tribe, initially curious about her difference, soon accepted it as simply part of who she was. They invented games that Ayanna could play, adjusting rules without comment or complaint. In their innocent wisdom, they saw not what she lacked, but what she offered. A laugh that rang like silver bells, a determination that inspired even the most skilled among them. "Look how she climbs!" exclaimed 8-year-old Joseph White Fox, watching Ayanna scramble up a rock formation with nimble determination. "She is like the mountain goat." The nickname stuck, Little Mountain Goat, spoken with affection rather than mockery. Naiche spent hours with her as she grew, teaching her to recognize plants that heal and those that harm. His patience was infinite as she learned to tie knots one-handed, to weave simple baskets, to make her single arm do the work of 2. "The Creator gives each of us different gifts," he told her one evening as they sat beside the fire. Ayanna, now 4 years old, listened with solemn attention. "Some can run like the wind. Others can sing to make the birds jealous. You, little one, were given the gift of seeing paths others cannot see." "Because I have to find different ways?" she asked. Her vocabulary advanced beyond her years, a result of hours spent in the company of elders. "Yes," Naiche nodded, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "And one day, that gift will help many people." Not everyone in the settlement embraced Ayanna so readily. Some elders, like Thomas Swift Horse, maintained a cautious distance. He watched the white child with wary eyes, as if expecting trouble to follow in her wake like thunderclouds behind summer heat. "She is not of our blood," he reminded the council when they gathered. What will happen when the white authorities discover we have one of their children? Yet even Thomas could not remain unmoved when, during the harsh winter of Ayana's 5th year, she stubbornly followed Sarah through deep snow to deliver medicine to his ailing wife. The child's determination, her refusal to be left behind despite the bitter cold, spoke of a spirit as indigenous to this land as the juniper and sage. In the town below the mountains, stories sometimes circulated. Whispers of a white child living among the Apache. Occasionally officials made inquiries, but the tribal leaders had learned to navigate these interactions with careful diplomacy. The child had been abandoned, they explained. No one had come seeking her. They had saved her life, and in truth, no one searched very hard. Edgar Mitchell had moved his family to California, unable to bear the whispers that followed them after what he had done. Martha carried the wound of her loss like an invisible amputation, far more debilitating than the physical difference her daughter had been born with. Ayana, meanwhile, grew strong under a sun that recognized her as its daughter, regardless of the color of her skin or the number of her limbs. By the time Ayana reached her 10th year, the question that had lingered at the edges of her consciousness became impossible to ignore. She had always known she was different, not just because of her missing arm, but because of her pale skin that burned under the summer sun, her hazel eyes that stood out among the dark brown gazes of her tribe, the copper-colored hair that Sarah braided each morning with gentle hands. One autumn afternoon, as she helped Eliza organize dried herbs in the medicine lodge, Ayana finally gave voice to the question, who were they? The ones who left me in the ravine? Eliza's weathered hands paused over a bundle of sage. The medicine woman had anticipated this moment, had prepared for it, yet the actual asking still sent a pang through her heart. Nietzsche found you there, she said carefully. We never knew their names. But they were white, like me. It wasn't a question. Yes. Ayana methodically tied a string around a bundle of mullein leaves, her right hand working with practiced efficiency. Why didn't they want me? Eliza sat beside her on the earthen floor, the scent of healing herbs surrounding them like an embrace. Some people fear what they don't understand. Your arm, she gestured to Ayana's left shoulder, made them afraid. They couldn't see past it to the strong spirit inside you. The boys in the settlement saw it yesterday, Ayana said quietly. Eliza's expression sharpened. What boys? Ayana had ridden with Joseph White Fox to the trading post at the edge of the reservation. A rare trip she had been permitted only because Joseph, now 16, was considered responsible enough to protect her. While Joseph spoke with the trader, 3 boys from the nearby town had approached Ayana, their curiosity quickly turning to cruel taunts. They called me a half-armed savage, Ayana recalled, her voice steady despite the hurt reflected in her eyes. They said I was thrown away because even white people didn't want a broken child, and that's why I live with... She stopped, unable to repeat the slur they had used for her tribe. Eliza's nostrils flared with anger, but her voice remained calm. And what did you do? A small smile touched Ayana's lips. I told them that having one arm just means I can hold a book and turn pages at the same time. This was a technique Nietzsche had taught her, one of many adaptations that transformed her difference into efficiency. They didn't understand. Then Joseph came back and they ran away. Eliza nodded, pride warming her stern features. You have learned well from Nietzsche. Words can only hurt if you accept their meaning. Later that evening, Ayana sought out Nietzsche. She found him by the river, carving a piece of cedar wood with his hunting knife. At 83, his hands sometimes trembled with palsy, but when he worked with wood or herbs, they became remarkably steady, guided by decades of practice. Grandfather, she said, sitting cross-legged beside him. It was what she had called him for as long as she could remember, though they shared no blood. Will you tell me again how you found me? Nietzsche set his carving aside. It was taking the shape of an eagle, wings spread in flight, and regarded her thoughtfully. "You know the story well. I want to hear it from you, not the story the others tell." He nodded, understanding her need. "I was gathering winter root and pine sap. The wind changed direction, bringing me your cry. It was very faint, like a chickadee far away. I followed it down into the rocks." He paused, his dark eyes seeing beyond the present moment to that winter day. "You were wrapped in a thin blanket, not properly tucked. Whoever left you there did not want you to survive the night." Ayana absorbed this with quiet dignity. "But you wanted me to live. The moment I saw you, I knew you carried important medicine. Your spirit called to mine." He touched her shoulder gently. "This does not make you less. It makes you chosen." "Chosen for what?" Nietzsche smiled, the creases around his eyes deepening. "That is for you to discover." In the years that followed, Ayana threw herself into learning everything Nietzsche and Eliza could teach her. She developed an extraordinary memory for medicinal plants, often identifying herbs by scent alone when Nietzsche tested her blindfolded. Her right hand became remarkably dexterous, capable of tying complex knots, grinding precise amounts of dried plants into powder, and even sewing neat stitches that the most skilled women in the tribe admired. When visitors from other tribes came to trade or for ceremonial gatherings, Ayana's presence initially raised eyebrows. But her quiet competence and evident belonging soon overshadowed questions about her origins. She learned Apache, English, and some Spanish from the missionary school that operated at the edge of the reservation, moving between languages as easily as she moved between worlds. By 12, she had begun to assist Eliza with treating minor injuries and illnesses. Her touch was gentle, her observations astute. Where others saw only symptoms, Ayana often perceived connections between a recurring headache and a patient's habit of sleeping beneath a certain type of tree, between stomach distress and a newly dug well. "You see with more than your eyes," Eliza told her. "This is a healer's gift." And though the question of her birth parents never fully disappeared, it receded into the background of a life growing increasingly rich with purpose. The summer Ayana turned 15 brought a drought that cracked the earth and tested the tribe's resilience. Plants withered under the relentless sun, and the creek that had faithfully provided water for generations shrank to a reluctant trickle. Game became scarce as animals migrated in search of water and shade. The reservation, already limited in resources, faced a quiet crisis. Nietzsche, now 88, had grown increasingly frail. His walks to gather herbs became shorter, his steps more measured. But his mind remained sharp as a hawk's gaze, and his determination to pass his knowledge to Ayana intensified, as if racing against the setting sun of his own life. "There are herbs that grow even in drought," he told her as they ventured out at dawn when the heat was still bearable. "Plants that know how to survive when others surrender." Ayana listened with the reverence of a disciple. Her copper hair, now falling to her waist, was braided with turquoise beads, a gift from Sarah for her last birthday. Her single arm had grown strong from years of compensation, the muscles defined beneath skin that had browned from constant exposure to the sun, though never to the deep copper of her Apache family. "Like this one," she said, kneeling beside a scraggly plant with silver-green leaves. "Desert sage. It roots deep to find water others cannot reach." Nietzsche nodded approvingly. "And what does it teach us?" "That strength often lies beneath the surface," she replied, carefully harvesting only what they needed, leaving the plant to continue its tenacious grip on life. Their quiet routine was shattered one afternoon by the sound of hoofbeats approaching the settlement at dangerous speed. Joseph White Fox, now a respected hunter of 21, dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, his face etched with urgency. "Fever at the northern camp," he announced, addressing the small crowd that quickly gathered. "Many are sick. The children worst of all. Eliza, her once black hair now streaked with silver, emerged from her lodge. What kind of fever? Red rash, burning skin, confusion. Joseph's eyes were haunted. 3 children have already died. Measles. The word wasn't spoken aloud, but it passed through the settlement like a cold wind. The disease had torn through native communities before, leaving devastation in its wake. We must go to them, Eliza decided, already turning to gather supplies. The Indian agent has quarantined the northern camp, Joseph added grimly. Government doctor says no one in or out. Anger rippled through the gathered tribe members. The government doctor rarely visited the reservation, and his remedies were often as harmful as the diseases they purported to treat. People will die waiting for him to care, Eliza spat. Ayana, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. I could go, she said, her voice quiet but firm. The agent doesn't know me as well as the rest of you. Absolutely not, Sarah protested immediately, fear flashing in her eyes. The measles. I've had them, Ayana reminded her. When she was 8, a mild case had swept through the settlement. While other children had fallen desperately ill, Ayana had suffered only a light rash and low fever. Eliza had attributed her resilience to the mixed blessing of her white blood, which carried some resistance to European diseases. She's right, Eliza admitted reluctantly. And she knows the treatments as well as I do. Better for some, Nietzsche added, pride evident in his voice. Her hands work wonders with the fever root. In the end, they formed a plan. Ayana would go with Joseph, carrying medicines prepared by Eliza. They would approach the northern camp from the west, avoiding the main trail where the Indian agent might have posted guards. As Ayana packed herbs and tinctures into leather pouches, Nietzsche approached her, carrying something wrapped in soft deerskin. For you, he said, unfolding the covering to reveal a knife with a handle carved from antler, polished to a warm glow by decades of use. Intricate symbols adorned the handle: protection, healing, strength. My father gave this to me when I became a healer. Now it passes to you. Ayana's throat tightened as she accepted the precious gift. I'll honor it, she promised. Honor yourself, he corrected gently. The knife is just a tool. The healing comes from within you. The journey to the northern camp took most of the night. Joseph led the way through narrow canyons and across rocky plateaus, paths known only to those who had lived on this land for generations. Ayana rode behind him, her mind focused on the treatments she would need to administer, mentally reviewing Eliza's instructions mixed with Nietzsche's wisdom. What they found at the camp tested everything she had learned. 37 people ill, more than half of them children. The government doctor had visited once, left some pills that quickly ran out, and promised to return with more medicine. A promise now 3 days old with no fulfillment. Ayana worked without rest, moving from one patient to another. She brewed willowbark tea for fever, prepared poultices of herbs to ease the rash, and mixed honey with special roots to soothe raw, coughing throats. Joseph helped where he could, fetching water, holding children while Ayana administered remedies, speaking soft encouragement to frightened parents. The white doctor said nothing could be done, one mother whispered, as Ayana bathed her son's feverish face with cool water infused with mint. That we should prepare for the worst. Ayana met the woman's gaze steadily. There is always something that can be done, she replied, always. By dawn, the tide had begun to turn. 2 more children died, losses that Ayana felt like physical blows, but others showed improvement. The camp elders watched with a mixture of gratitude and wonder as this one-armed girl moved among their sick with confidence beyond her years. Her methods a seamless blend of traditional knowledge and practical adaptations. Who taught you to heal like this? Asked an elder woman as Ayana showed her how to continue the treatments. My grandfather, Ayana replied simply. He found me when others threw me away, and he taught me that what some see as brokenness, others recognize as medicine. The news traveled across the reservation like wildfire. The one-armed healer had saved dozens during the measles outbreak. In the 3 years that followed, Ayana's reputation grew. People from neighboring tribes began to seek her out, sometimes traveling for days to consult the young woman who blended Apache wisdom with innovative techniques adapted to her unique abilities. Now 18, Ayana's confidence had blossomed alongside her skills. Her methods were unorthodox but effective. Splints designed to be tied one-handed, medicines prepared in ways that required minimal handling, diagnoses that relied heavily on observation and listening rather than invasive examinations. But the greatest test of her abilities and her heart came on a crisp autumn morning when Sarah burst into the medicine lodge where Ayana was grinding juniper berries into powder. "It's Nietzsche," Sarah gasped, fear evident in her eyes. "He won't wake properly." Ayana dropped everything and ran. She found her grandfather lying on his sleeping mat, his breathing shallow, his normally alert eyes unfocused. When she spoke his name, he turned toward her voice, but seemed to look through her rather than at her. "Stroke," Eliza diagnosed grimly when she arrived moments later. "The spirit tries to leave while the body remains." For 7 days and nights, Ayana barely left Nietzsche's side. She prepared the strongest medicines she knew, gently massaging his throat to help him swallow them. She spoke to him constantly, reminding him of stories he had told her, reciting the names of healing plants as if they were prayers, holding his hand when words failed her. On the 7th night, as a full moon bathed the settlement in silver light, Nietzsche's eyes suddenly cleared. He looked directly at Ayana, truly seeing her for the first time since his collapse. "My flower," he whispered, using the endearment he had called her since childhood. "You fight too hard to keep an old man from his journey." "You're not finished teaching me yet," she replied, tears streaming down her face despite her attempt at a smile. "I have taught you everything these hands know." His voice was weak but clear. "But the most important lessons come from your own heart." He beckoned her closer. When she leaned in, he continued in a voice meant only for her. "There is a doctor in Flagstaff, David Richardson. He treats native patients when others refuse. He has books, knowledge that could complement what you already know." Ayana shook her head in confusion. "You want me to seek a white doctor's teaching? I want you to build bridges where others have built walls." His hand, once so strong, now felt fragile as bird bones when he squeezed her fingers. "Your life spans 2 worlds, Ayana. That is not an accident of fate. It is your medicine." By morning, Nietzsche was gone. The tribe mourned for 4 days, honoring the man who had been their healer, teacher, and elder for nearly 9 decades. Ayana's grief was a physical presence, a weight that made even breathing seem an impossible task. Yet even in her sorrow, Nietzsche's final words echoed in her mind. 2 weeks after they returned his body to the earth, she approached the tribal council. "I wish to go to Flagstaff," she announced, standing tall despite the murmurs her statement provoked, "to learn from the doctor there." Thomas Swift Horse, now the most senior elder, studied her with skeptical eyes. Though he had come to respect Ayana over the years, his caution regarding the outside world remained intact. "Nietzsche's knowledge was not enough for you?" he asked. "Nietzsche himself sent me on this path," she replied evenly. "His last words to me." This silenced the objections that had been building. No one would contradict the final guidance of their respected healer. Joseph White Fox, who had become one of Ayana's staunchest allies, spoke up from his place among the warriors. "I will accompany her to ensure her safety." And so, on a cool spring morning, Ayana rode toward Flagstaff with Joseph, carrying little more than a change of clothes, Nietzsche's knife, and a letter of introduction from the missionary school teacher who had been impressed by her intelligence and determination. Flagstaff in 1970 was a town of contrasts. Modern conveniences alongside frontier ruggedness, university students mixing with loggers and ranchers. For Ayanna, whose trips beyond the reservation had been limited to small trading posts and neighboring tribal lands, the bustling streets and two-story buildings seemed like another world entirely. Dr. David Richardson's clinic occupied a modest building on the edge of town. A balding man in his 50s with kind eyes and a perpetually wrinkled shirt, he looked up from his paperwork when Ayanna and Joseph entered his waiting room. His gaze traveled briefly to Ayanna's missing arm before meeting her eyes without a hint of pity or discomfort, a response she immediately noted and appreciated. "I'm looking for Dr. Richardson," she said, her English precise but flavored with the cadence of Apache. "You found him," he replied, setting aside his papers. "How can I help you?" Ayanna straightened her shoulders. "My name is Ayanna. I was raised by Naiche, healer of the White Mountain Apache. Before he died, he sent me to you." Recognition flickered in Richardson's eyes. "Naiche? Yes, I met him years ago at a medical outreach on the reservation. Remarkable man. He knew more about local medicinal plants than most botanists I've encountered. He taught me everything he knew," Ayanna said, "but he believed I should learn your medicine too." Dr. Richardson studied her for a long moment, noting her confident posture, the intelligence in her gaze, the way she had adapted to her physical difference without apparent self-consciousness. "And what do you hope to do with this combined knowledge?" he asked carefully. Ayanna's answer came without hesitation. "Heal those who need healing, whether they live on the reservation or beyond it." A slow smile spread across Richardson's face. "Well then," he said, "we'd better get started." Learning under Dr. Richardson proved both exhilarating and exhausting. Ayanna absorbed knowledge with the same tenacity she'd shown since childhood, but the adjustment to town life presented challenges she hadn't anticipated. Joseph returned to the reservation after ensuring her safe establishment in Flagstaff, leaving her to navigate this new world alone for the first time in her life. Dr. Richardson arranged a small room for her in the home of a widowed nurse named Margaret Billings, who regarded her initially with wary curiosity that gradually warmed to genuine respect. The town itself was less welcoming. In shops and on streets, Ayanna encountered stares that focused first on her missing arm, then on her indigenous features, before dismissing her entirely. "Don't let them diminish you," Margaret advised over dinner one evening, noticing Ayanna's subdued demeanor after a particularly difficult day. "Most people fear what they don't understand, and you, my dear, are wonderfully incomprehensible to them." Ayanna smiled at this unexpected encouragement. "My grandfather used to say something similar. Wise man, your grandfather." At the clinic, Ayanna's days filled with previously unimagined knowledge. Dr. Richardson taught her to read X-rays, to administer injections with precision, to recognize illnesses through laboratory tests instead of just observation. She learned about antibiotics, surgical techniques, and diagnostic procedures that seemed like magic compared to the methods she had known. Yet for every modern miracle she witnessed, Ayanna also saw limitations. The rushed pace of treatment that left no time for listening to patients' full stories. The dismissal of emotional and spiritual factors in healing. The aggressive interventions that sometimes seemed to cause as much suffering as the diseases they targeted. "Medicine isn't just about fighting illness," she remarked to Dr. Richardson one evening as they reviewed patient files. "It's about restoring balance." He looked up, intrigued. "Tell me more." "In our way, when someone is sick, we look at their whole life, what they eat, how they sleep, the stories they carry, their connection to family and land. Healing means addressing all of it, not just the symptoms." Dr. Richardson leaned back in his chair, considering her words. Western medicine is starting to recognize that approach, though we call it holistic care. But the system doesn't make it easy to practice. 6 months into her apprenticeship, Ayana's unique approach to medicine was tested when a logging accident brought 5 severely injured men to the clinic simultaneously. With Dr. Richardson performing emergency surgery on the most critical patient, Ayana found herself responsible for stabilizing the others. One man, his leg badly crushed, fought against the pain medication, his panic increasing his blood pressure to dangerous levels. Ayana approached him calmly, her right hand firm on his shoulder. "Look at me," she instructed, her voice adopting the rhythmic cadence she had used during healing ceremonies. When his frantic eyes met hers, she continued, "Breathe with me, slow and deep, like wind through canyon walls." A douche, to the astonishment of the attending nurse, the man's breathing steadied, his pulse slowed, and his rigid muscles gradually relaxed enough to allow treatment. Later, after all patients had been stabilized, Dr. Richardson found Ayana cleaning equipment, her face showing the strain of the intense experience. "Margaret told me what happened with Jenkins," he said. "That's a technique they don't teach in medical school." Ayana shrugged modestly. "His spirit was fighting harder than his body could handle. I just helped him find balance again." Dr. Richardson studied her thoughtfully. "You know, there's a movement happening in medicine. Doctors questioning the establishment, looking for better ways to treat the whole person. You could be part of that." "I already am," she replied simply. As her year with Dr. Richardson approached its conclusion, Ayana's vision for her future clarified. She would return to the reservation, but not to practice in isolation. She began sketching plans for a clinic that would serve both her tribe and nearby communities, a place where traditional healing and modern medicine could complement each other. "It won't be easy," Dr. Richardson warned when she shared her idea. "You'll face resistance from both sides, traditionalists who fear change and medical authorities who dismiss indigenous knowledge." Ayana touched Nietzsche's knife, which she still carried at her waist. "The hardest paths often lead to the most necessary destinations," she replied, echoing one of her grandfather's favorite sayings. Her mind was made up. It was time to build the bridge Nietzsche had envisioned, not just for herself, but for all those caught between worlds. The reservation had changed little during Ayana's year away, yet she returned a different person. Knowledge had transformed her, expanding her vision while deepening her connection to the path Nietzsche had set her upon. Sarah welcomed her with tears and embraces, examining her daughter's face as if searching for any sign that the outside world had diminished her spirit. "You look strong," she finally declared, approval warming her voice. Like a tree that has weathered its first great storm. Eliza, now moving with the deliberate slowness of advanced age, nodded in agreement. "Nietzsche would be proud," she said simply, the highest praise she could offer. Ayana wasted no time in presenting her vision to the tribal council. In the same council lodge where she had once requested permission to study in Flagstaff, she now unfolded detailed plans for a clinic that would serve the reservation and surrounding communities. A place of healing that honors our traditions while embracing beneficial knowledge from outside, she explained, her single hand gesturing to emphasize key points, where patients can receive the best of both worlds. The council's reaction was mixed. Some elders, including Thomas Swift Horse, remained skeptical of anything that brought outside influence to the tribe. Others saw the practical benefits but worried about government interference if formal medical services were established on tribal land. "The Indian Health Service will try to control it," warned one councilman. "They'll send their own doctors who know nothing of our ways." "Not if we establish it independently," Ayana countered. "Dr. Richardson has connections with physicians who respect indigenous healing practices. They would consult rather than control. After hours of debate, the council granted conditional approval. Ayana could use the old trading post building at the edge of the settlement, and they would reassess after 6 months. It wasn't the enthusiastic endorsement she had hoped for, but it was enough to begin. The challenges emerged immediately. The building needed extensive repairs, a leaking roof, crumbling adobe walls, and floors warped by decades of desert heat and monsoon humidity. With Joseph's help, along with several younger tribal members curious about her project, Ayana tackled the renovations herself. Her adaptive techniques for one-handed construction work drew admiration from even the most skilled builders in the tribe. "Never seen anyone handle a hammer that way," remarked one young man, after watching Ayana devise a method to hold nails steady while striking them. "Necessity teaches innovation," she replied with a smile, wiping sweat from her brow. As the clinic took shape physically, resistance to it grew in other forms. The Indian Health Service doctor, who visited the reservation monthly, expressed open skepticism about her qualifications and intentions. Local physicians in the nearest town declined her requests for collaboration, one stating bluntly that he didn't work with reservation medicine women. Most painfully, several tribal elders forbade their families from seeking treatment at her clinic, insisting that mixing traditional ways with outside medicine would weaken both. "They fear what they cannot control," Sarah consoled her one evening as Ayana sat dejectedly outside her newly completed clinic, which had seen only 3 patients in its first week of operation. "Fear makes people build walls instead of bridges." "I'm not asking them to abandon their beliefs," Ayana said, frustration evident in her voice, "just to expand their vision of what healing can be." "Change comes slowly to people who have lost much already," Sarah reminded her gently. "Each loss makes them hold tighter to what remains." The turning point arrived with unexpected violence on a scorching July afternoon. A flash flood swept through a canyon where several tribal families had been gathering wild berries, carrying away 2 vehicles and injuring 12 people. The nearest hospital was 50 miles away, accessible only by roads now partially washed out. The Indian Health Service doctor was unreachable, somewhere on the Navajo reservation to the north. Word reached the settlement, and injured survivors began arriving at Ayana's clinic, the only medical facility within reach. Severe lacerations, broken bones, a child with water in her lungs, an elder with a suspected heart attack triggered by the trauma. Ayana transformed instantly from frustrated visionary to focused healer. She directed community members to assist, assigning tasks based on ability, boiling water, tearing cloth for bandages, holding patients still during painful procedures. "Margaret," she called to a teenage girl who had shown interest in medicine, "remember how I showed you to count heartbeats? I need you to monitor Grandfather Wilson while I attend to the child." Hour after hour, Ayana moved between patients with calm efficiency. She stitched wounds with the precise technique Dr. Richardson had taught her, stabilized fractures using both modern splints and traditional binding methods, and administered antibiotics from her carefully maintained supply, while also preparing herbal infusions to ease pain and shock. When a young mother began hemorrhaging from a deep abdominal wound, Ayana performed an emergency blood transfusion using equipment Dr. Richardson had gifted her, identifying a compatible donor through family relationships in a way no blood typing equipment could match on the reservation. "The sister shares the strongest blood connection," she explained as she skillfully inserted the transfusion needle. "In our traditions, we say their spirits were formed from the same star." By nightfall, all 12 patients had been stabilized. No lives were lost. As Ayana finally sat to rest, exhaustion etching lines around her eyes. She found herself surrounded by tribal members who had witnessed her work throughout the day, including several elders who had previously opposed her clinic. Thomas Swifthorse approached her slowly, his weathered face unreadable. He stood before her in silence for a long moment, then spoke words that carried the weight of formal acknowledgement. "Today, you honored both your grandfathers, the one who found you and the ones before him. Your medicine is strong." The next morning, as Ayana tended to her patients, a government jeep pulled up outside the clinic. A middle-aged white man in a rumpled suit entered, removing his hat as he surveyed the scene. Injured tribal members resting on clean pallets, family members assisting with care, medicines both pharmaceutical and herbal organized neatly on shelves. "I'm William Buchanan, Regional Director for Indian Health Service," he announced, his gaze finally settling on Ayana as she finished changing a bandage. "I heard about what happened here yesterday. Remarkable work under the circumstances." "Thank you," Ayana replied cautiously, accustomed to government representatives who arrived with praise but departed having changed nothing. Buchanan cleared his throat, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant for a bureaucrat. "Miss, I'm sorry, I don't know what to call you. Ayana, just Ayana." "Ayana, then. I'll be direct. What you've established here is exactly the kind of program IHS should be supporting, but rarely does. I'd like to discuss possible funding without the usual governmental takeover. Your model has personal significance to me." Something in his expression caught Ayana's attention, a vulnerability beneath the official exterior. Before she could inquire further, one of her patients called for assistance, and the conversation was temporarily suspended. Yet, as she attended to her patient, Ayana sensed that another unexpected door was opening on her path, one that might lead to the broader impact Naiche had envisioned for her unique medicine. William Buchanan returned to Ayana's clinic the following day, bringing not just promises but tangible support, medical supplies, medication, and official paperwork that would allow her facility to receive ongoing government assistance without surrendering its unique approach. As they sorted through inventory together, Ayana studied the man more carefully. Something in his manner, a gentleness perhaps, or a particular attentiveness to detail, reminded her of Dr. Richardson. "May I ask what brought you to Indian Health Service, Mr. Buchanan?" she inquired as they catalogued antibiotics. He paused, a bottle of penicillin suspended in his hand. "William, please." Setting the medication down, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a worn photograph, which he passed to Ayana. The image showed a smiling teenage girl with bright eyes and an empty right sleeve, standing proudly beside a science fair display. "My daughter, Rebecca," he explained quietly, "born without her right arm. She's studying biology at Northern Arizona University now. Wants to become a doctor specializing in congenital differences." Understanding dawned in Ayana's eyes. "That's why my clinic caught your attention. When I heard about a one-armed Apache woman running a medical facility that combines traditional and modern approaches, well, let's just say it resonated on a personal level." His smile carried the weight of years advocating for his daughter. "I've spent Rebecca's entire life fighting systems that underestimate people like her, like you." This revelation transformed their professional relationship into something deeper. William became not just a bureaucratic ally, but a genuine collaborator in Ayana's vision. With his assistance, the clinic secured formal recognition as a pilot program for integrative medicine on reservations. Equipment arrived, followed by occasional visiting specialists who came to both teach and learn. By the following spring, Ayana's clinic had become a vital resource not only for the White Mountain Apache, but for neighboring communities as well. Patients sometimes traveled hundreds of miles, drawn by stories of a healer who addressed both body and spirit with equal skill. "You've created something extraordinary here," William remarked during one of his monthly visits, watching as Ayana trained 2 young tribal members in wound care techniques, something that could be replicated elsewhere. Indeed, Ayana had begun developing a training program for others interested in her integrated approach. Margaret, the teenager who had assisted during the flood emergency, had become her first dedicated apprentice, displaying both the technical aptitude for modern medical procedures and the spiritual sensitivity required for traditional healing practices. "My grandfather believed that knowledge dies if it isn't shared," Ayana explained. "The medicine I practice isn't mine alone. It belongs to anyone willing to learn it with an open heart." As her 21st birthday approached, Ayana found herself reflecting on the journey that had led her to this moment. The abandoned infant had become a respected healer, building bridges between worlds that had long regarded each other with suspicion. Sarah, now in her 60s, beamed with quiet pride whenever she observed her daughter at work, sometimes assisting with the preparation of traditional remedies. Yet amidst this fulfillment, questions about her origins occasionally surfaced, not with the urgency of her younger years, but with a contemplative curiosity. Who had her birth parents been? What circumstances had led them to that desperate decision in the ravine? On a warm afternoon in late April, as Ayana catalogued native medicinal plants for a research project in collaboration with the university, William arrived for an unscheduled visit. His expression bore an unusual gravity that immediately caught her attention. "I need to speak with you privately," he said after greeting her. In the small office she had created at the back of the clinic, William carefully closed the door before continuing. "I've been doing some research," he began, his voice measured, "into reservation records from 1952, specifically reports of abandoned infants." Ayana set down her pen, her full attention engaged. "You found something?" He nodded, withdrawing a folder from his briefcase. "There was an official report filed by a missionary school teacher in February of that year. A student had confided in her about a baby abandoned near Thompson's Ravine, a newborn girl missing her left arm." Ayana's heart quickened. "Did the report name the parents?" "Not directly, but it mentioned that a local man, Edgar Mitchell, and his wife had suddenly left the area around that time, claiming a family emergency in California." William paused, watching her reaction carefully. "I took the liberty of tracing them. Edgar passed away in 1967, but Martha Mitchell is still alive. She lives in Phoenix." The revelation hung in the air between them, its implications unfolding in Ayana's mind like a map to unexplored territory. Martha Mitchell, her birth mother, was alive, just hours away. "She doesn't know I've found this connection," William added gently. "I wanted you to decide what, if anything, should happen next." Ayana stood and walked to the small window that overlooked the clinic grounds. Outside, life continued its steady rhythm, patients arriving, children playing, elders sharing stories in the shade. This was her world, built from choices both made for her and by her. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally, turning back to face William. "I need time to think about this." That evening, Ayana sought out Sarah, finding her weaving a basket outside their home as sunset painted the desert in gold and crimson. Without preamble, she shared what William had discovered. Sarah's hands stilled on the half-finished basket, her expression unreadable in the fading light. "Have you always wondered about her?" Sarah asked when Ayana had finished. "Sometimes," Ayana admitted. "Not because what I found with you and the tribe wasn't enough, it was everything. But there's a space in my history that remains blank." Sarah reached for Ayana's hand, her fingers warm and calloused from decades of work. "When Nietzsche brought you to us, I feared losing you someday. To illness, to the white world, to the woman who birthed you. But you grew roots here deeper than I imagined possible. She squeezed Ayana's fingers. Strong trees can withstand exploring new ground. You think I should meet her? I think you should follow what your heart tells you is necessary for healing. Not just others' healing, but your own. Sarah's wisdom, as always, cut straight to the core of the matter. Later, beneath a blanket of stars that had witnessed her entire journey, Ayana made her decision. She would meet Martha Mitchell, not seeking a mother, for she already had one in Sarah, but searching for understanding. The circle that began in abandonment might find completion in reconciliation. As she prepared for sleep, Ayana touched Nietzsche's knife, still kept beside her bed after all these years. You were right, grandfather, she whispered to the presence she still felt guiding her. My path spans two worlds. Perhaps it's time to close the gap between them. The modest apartment complex on the outskirts of Phoenix seemed an unlikely setting for such a momentous encounter. Ayana sat in William's government car, her heartbeat a drum against her ribs as she studied the building's weathered stucco exterior. After 21 years, just 100 yards separated her from the woman who had brought her into the world. Are you ready? William asked gently. Ayana nodded, though readiness seemed an impossible state for this moment. She wore a simple dress of deep blue cotton, her copper hair braided with beads of turquoise and silver, a deliberate choice that honored both her Apache upbringing and the heritage she had been born into. Around her neck hung a small deerskin pouch containing juniper leaves and sage, a protection bundle Sarah had prepared for her journey. Martha Mitchell lived in apartment 214. Each step up the concrete staircase felt significant, a climbing not just toward a door, but toward completion of a circle begun in winter cold and desperate choices. William had arranged this meeting with care, explaining to Martha only that someone connected to her past wished to meet her, allowing Ayana the privacy to share her identity in her own way. A woman in her late 60s opened the door, thin, with grey hair cut short around a face etched by decades of what appeared to be quiet sorrow. Her eyes, hazel like Ayana's own, widened slightly at the sight of her visitor. Mrs. Mitchell, William began formally. This is Ayana, the person I mentioned on the phone. Martha nodded politely, though confusion was evident in her expression as she invited them inside. The apartment was neat but sparsely furnished. A sofa with faded floral upholstery, a small dining table, walls adorned with cross-stitch samplers featuring Bible verses about redemption and forgiveness. Would you like some tea? She offered, her voice soft, almost tentative. Thank you, Ayana replied, struck by the surreal ordinariness of accepting hospitality from the woman who had given her life. They sat with steaming mugs at the dining table, an awkward silence filling the space, until Ayana gathered her courage and spoke. Mrs. Mitchell, I was born in February 1952, she began, watching carefully as the older woman's hands tightened around her mug. I was born missing my left arm, and I was left in Thompson's Ravine shortly after my birth. The cup slipped from Martha's fingers, tea spilling across the table. She made no move to clean it up, her face draining of color as she stared at Ayana with dawning recognition. It can't be, she whispered, one trembling hand rising to cover her mouth. You survived. An Apache elder found me that same day, Ayana continued, her voice steady despite the emotion coursing through her. He took me to his people, who raised me as their own. Martha's eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks unchecked. All these years, I thought you died that day. I've carried that belief like a stone in my heart. I didn't come here for blame or accusation, Ayana said softly. I came to understand. William tactfully excused himself to wait outside, leaving the two women alone with decades of unspoken history between them. Martha's story emerged in halting fragments, a young wife dominated by a husband whose religious fervor bordered on fanaticism, his belief that Ayana's birth defect was divine punishment for some imagined sin, his insistence that the infant be returned to God, rather than raised as an embarrassment to the family name. "I was weak," Martha admitted, shame evident in every line of her face. "Exhausted from childbirth, terrified of Edgar's anger, and raised to believe a woman must submit to her husband's will. I let him take you away while I lay in bed crying until I had no tears left." Her voice broke. "There hasn't been a single day since that I haven't thought of you, prayed for you, begged God for forgiveness I didn't deserve." Ayana listened without interruption, allowing Martha the unburdening she had clearly needed for decades. When the older woman finally fell silent, Ayana reached across the table with her right hand and gently covered Martha's fingers with her own. "The man who found me, Naiche, taught me that what some see as brokenness, others recognize as medicine," she said. "My life without my left arm led me to become a healer who works between two worlds. I don't believe I was punished or broken. I believe I was made exactly as I needed to be for the path I walk." Martha stared at their joined hands, then raised her eyes to meet Ayana's gaze. "You have his kindness," she said unexpectedly. "My father's. He died before you were born, but he had that same way of looking at people, seeing beyond their failings to something deeper." They talked for hours. Martha showed Ayana faded photographs of grandparents she had never known, shared stories of her own childhood in Minnesota, and listened with wonder as Ayana described life on the reservation and her work at the clinic. "After Edgar died," Martha explained, "I started volunteering at a home for disabled children, trying to atone, I suppose. I never imagined I would meet you, certainly never dared hope you would have such strength and purpose." As evening approached, Ayana prepared to leave. The meeting had provided answers, though not the simple ones she might have expected. Martha was neither villain nor victim, but a complex woman whose greatest mistake had led, through paths she could never have foreseen, to Ayana's extraordinary journey. "Would it be possible? Might I someday visit your clinic?" Martha asked hesitantly as they stood at the door. "Not to intrude on your life, just to see the work you do." Ayana considered this request, feeling the weight of Sarah's trust and her tribal community's privacy. Yet she also recognized that healing sometimes required unexpected connections. "Yes," she decided, "I think that would be good, for both of us." 1 month later, Martha Mitchell stood beside Sarah Two Rivers at the entrance to Ayana's clinic. Two mothers from different worlds, united by love for the same daughter. The meeting had been tentative at first, laden with unspoken emotions, but Sarah's inherent grace had transformed potential tension into respectful acknowledgement. "She has your eyes," Sarah said simply. "But her spirit has always belonged to the land and the people who raised her." Martha nodded, accepting both the connection offered and the boundaries it established. "Thank you for giving her what I couldn't." Inside the clinic, Ayana moved among her patients with practiced confidence, her single arm adjusting an elder's bandage, her voice providing instructions to Margaret and 2 new apprentices, one Apache, one from the nearby town, both drawn by the unique medicine practiced here. William Buchanan arrived that afternoon with news that spread like wildfire through the reservation. The success of Ayana's integrative approach had attracted attention from medical authorities across the Southwest. Funding had been approved for an expanded facility, and her training program for indigenous healers incorporating Western medical knowledge would become an official pilot project for reservations throughout Arizona. "They're calling it the Two Worlds Health Initiative," William announced, beaming with pride at what they had accomplished together, "and they want you to lead it." As sunset painted the sky in spectacular hues, Ayana walked to the edge of the settlement, seeking a moment of quiet reflection. From a small leather pouch, she withdrew a smooth stone that Nietzsche had given her on her 10th birthday. A stone from the very ravine where her life had begun in abandonment. "The place of your beginning does not determine the path of your journey," he had told her then. "Remember this when you doubt your purpose." Standing between the worlds that had shaped her, the reservation behind her, the distant lights of Phoenix on the horizon, Ayana felt the truth of those words more profoundly than ever before. She was neither defined by her abandonment nor limited by her physical difference. She was exactly who she needed to be. 5 years later, on a crisp winter morning reminiscent of the day Nietzsche had found her, Ayana stood before a gathering that would have seemed impossible in 1952. Tribal leaders from 3 states, medical professionals from prestigious institutions, government officials, and community members from both reservation and town assembled for the dedication of the expanded Two Worlds Healing Center. The facility now included a modern medical wing alongside spaces dedicated to traditional healing practices, classrooms for training new generations of integrative practitioners, and a research department documenting the effectiveness of combined approaches. What had begun as one determined woman's vision had blossomed into a movement changing lives across the Southwest. Among those seated in the front row, Sarah and Martha sat side by side, one who had chosen Ayana, one who had been given a second chance to know her. Behind them, William Buchanan and his daughter Rebecca, now a medical student specializing in pediatric care for children with limb differences, listened attentively. Ayana stepped to the podium, surveying the diverse faces before her. The journey from abandoned infant to respected healer had not been easy, but standing here, she recognized that every step, even the painful beginnings, had been necessary. "I stand before you today as living proof that perceived brokenness can become medicine," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Not despite our differences, but because of them. The ravine that was meant to be my ending became my beginning instead." She touched Nietzsche's knife, now worn smooth from decades of use, still carried at her waist as both tool and talisman. "My grandfather taught me that healing happens in the spaces between tradition and innovation, between cultures, between what we've lost and what we've found. It is in these spaces that we discover our true medicine." As applause rose around her, Ayana's gaze lifted to the distant mountains where Thompson's Ravine cut through ancient stone, the place where one life had ended and another had begun. The circle was complete, yet the journey continued, rippling outward like water touching shore, reaching toward horizons she was only beginning to imagine.